Let me go to the. So we are past our 5:30 time. Do we want to wait a little bit more before we let the members of the public in?
Well, it's 5:30. Why don't we let everyone in and yeah, give it a few minutes for all our
Okay.
advisory committee members. Hello, Manny.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Welcome. Good to see you again, Manny.
Hello.
So as folks are joining, members of the advisory committee, if you can rename yourself to add AC in front of your name, so it's easier for us to identify who's a part of the advisory committee. Started to do that for some of you already, but if we have missed you, please do so. And we'll get started in a few minutes. We're still waiting for folks to join. And good evening. We are just waiting for members of the advisory committee and public to join and for us to have quorum. While we are waiting for others to join, just want to remind you, this meeting is also being live streamed on Facebook. And the chat is open, and we will be recording the chat feature, the comments in the chat feature as well. Susie, I think we should get started. Elena, is this live stream up and running?
Yes, we are now live streaming through Facebook.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Happy New Year, even though we are in February already. This month has gone by quickly. For those who don't know me, I'm Simran Malhotra. I'm a principal with Remy & Associates, and we are leading a multidisciplinary team to prepare a downtown Watsonville specific plan. It's good to see you all today. This is a really good turnout, and I'm excited to have you all here, and we look forward to a good discussion with you. If you didn't get the notice on your screen already, this meeting is being live streamed on Facebook, and it is also being recorded. Carlos, would you announce that Spanish translation is available and how to access it?
My pleasure. Para las personas que hablan español, que necesiten traducción al español, pueden utilizar el icono en la parte de abajo de su pantalla donde dice interpretación y pueden escoger el español, donde dice Spanish, y ahí van a estar escuchando a nuestra compañera Angélica en español. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. So very briefly, just wanted to overview the Zoom meeting tools. You have the mute button as well as the video button on the bottom of your screen that you can use to turn your audio on and off. During the presentation, please keep your microphones off. And if you have a comment or a question at the appropriate time, please raise your hand, and at that time, please unmute yourself. We encourage all advisory committee members to keep their cameras on. And for the rest of the attendees, it's up to you whether you do or not. The chat is open. Feel free to share your thoughts. We'll also capture what we hear in the chat feature in our meeting notes. We will try to respond to as many questions or comments during the meeting, but we may not get to all of them here today. And if there are any technical difficulties with Zoom, please email my colleague Jasmine at remyassociates.com. Her email address is on the screen. So let's get started. In the interest of time today, we'll not do our usual roll call. We'll make note of who's here for the meeting notes. So, but welcome advisory committee members and the members of the public. We also have several city staff and members of the consultant team here. Besides myself and Jasmine Williams, we have Ben Sigmund from Economic Planning Systems. He's our team's economist, and he'll be presenting a good portion of the presentation today. And now I'll turn this over to Susie Merriam, Community Development Director, to introduce her team and make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Simran. Hello, everybody. Oops, sorry. I'm Susie Merriam. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Watsonville. And tonight we also have Principal Planner Justin Meek, who is also the project manager for the downtown specific plan. From our housing division, we have Carlos Landaveri. He's our housing manager, and he'll be helping us with part of this presentation tonight. Sarah Weichel, Associate Planner, is listening in as well. Elena Ortiz, our administrative analyst, is on the line, and she provides some of the magic behind the scenes, including making sure we can get this presentation live streamed on Facebook. So thank you, Elena. And then our interpretation is being provided by Angelica Waragi, and she works for the city's police department. So thank you all for your help tonight. And I want to thank you all for attending our Downtown Specific Plan Advisory Committee meeting tonight. The advisory committee has invested their time for 2 years now in helping craft the basic elements of the plan. And we're looking to finish up our advisory committee meetings this June. So that's great news for our advisory committee meeting. But again, thank you so much for your dedication and assistance as we work through this project during COVID, which has not been super easy. As I can see from everyone on the call tonight, I think we've got a record number of attendees. Housing is a very important topic to many people, both here in Watsonville as well as throughout the county and the state. And housing is an integral part of the downtown Watsonville specific plan for a variety of reasons. Of course, this includes meeting the state mandates to provide housing, but also we know that to have a vibrant downtown, we need to have a healthy mix of market rate, affordable rental and ownership opportunities within the downtown area to serve everybody and make our downtown accessible to all people. So I want to start with circling back to the specific plans, guiding principles in which housing is one of several principles that are important to the community. And those guiding principles are up at the screen, on the screen, sorry, but we really, the community wants to make sure that Watsonville's downtown remains unique, that there's a varied choice of things in the downtown for all of our diverse community to experience, creating housing opportunities for all, promoting economic prosperity, having a safe and vibrant downtown, one that's inclusive, healthy, and culturally connected. Looking at reimagining and innovating mobility options and connections, and then incorporating sustainable design elements to improve our community's health. And again, as I said earlier, tonight's meeting is but one in a series of advisory committee meetings that we've held since 2020. As we work through some basic building blocks to imagine what the downtown might look like, we'll be diving into more specific topics this spring, including tonight's presentation on housing. Then we'll be looking at traffic and parking, economic development, and then a couple of reviews of the draft plan. And up on your screen, you can see all of the meetings and the topics that we've discussed thus far. Tonight, we're at meeting number 6. We're discussing housing and then future meetings as well. So I understand that each of you participating in the meeting tonight may have deeply held beliefs on housing, and you may not agree with everything that's said tonight. I'd like to remind everyone of the advisory committee's ground rules in the hope that we can actively listen to everyone's point of view respectfully, with the knowledge that just because we might not agree on everything that's said tonight, we all care deeply about the future of our downtown Watsonville, and we want to see it prosper. So again, the ground rules are on your screen, and I hope that we can really engage in a robust and civil conversation tonight and continue to move forward together as we develop this specific plan for our downtown. And with that, I will turn the meeting back over to Simran, and let's get started.
Thank you, Susie. So today we have a pretty full agenda. We have a lot of slides. We sent those out earlier last week, so you would have a chance to absorb the information in there. What we'd like to do today is do a higher level review of what the materials we had previously sent out was, and then to spend some time answering any questions that came up, and also have a very robust discussion on the topic. So today, we'll give you an update of where we are in the preparation of the specific plan. Ben will provide some background data for housing in Watsonville, and Carlos will share the many current housing programs that the city has at this point in time. I will then describe some of the recent state laws that are intended to encourage housing production and address the issue of displacement. Ben will then present some of the best practices from other communities, and then we'll end with policy recommendations that we should consider for inclusion in the specific plan. Along the way, we'll stop at several points to answer any questions. And then, as I said, we anticipate a robust discussion at the end before we go to public comment. So for those who are new to the Downtown Watsonville specific plan, the next few slides give a brief overview of where we are. Since the project started about 2 years ago, we have completed our analysis of existing conditions, developed a long-term vision and guiding principles that Susie talked about, and developed a vision and land use framework for downtown. We presented in previous meetings more specific alternatives and character areas, and now are in the process of writing the specific plan. Through these two years, we have received feedback from the advisory committee, and we've also conducted extensive community engagement that I'll describe briefly in the next slide. And we anticipate having a public draft of the specific plan later this summer. So since the start of the project, we've had 5 advisory committee meetings as well as individual interviews with committee members, 2 public workshops, stakeholder interviews and focus groups, and have conducted 2 citywide surveys about the recommendations that are influencing what goes in the plan. We've also provided updates to the city council along the way. We have worked with city staff, you all, Caltrans and our team to refine the recommendations for various parts of downtown. We have developed a street network, a bicycle network, and developed conceptual design plans for several opportunity sites. The city has also recently learned that Caltrans is looking to fund the road diet concept on Main Streets, which will be critical to making the needed changes to the street network in downtown. That's very exciting news. And with that, I will turn this over to Ben to present some of the background information on housing in Watsonville.
Excellent. Thank you, Simran. Thank you, Susie. Good evening, everybody. Ben Sigmund with Economic and Planning Systems. Let's just dive in. We're going to set the table here with just a little bit of mapping and data to get us all sort of situated. So let's start off with that map of the downtown area as it is today. So this is existing land use by acreage. It's a predominantly commercial area with a lot of civic uses. Those 2 particular land uses make up the majority of the acreage in the downtown area. You can see there is about 1/5 of the acreage that gets residential use, but it tends to be out at the outskirts of downtown today. To great degree. And you really can see in this map that the Main Street is a concentration of commercial and civic. And this plan sort of seeks to introduce housing more evenly distributed throughout downtown. Keep going. Let's just talk about kind of growth trends. I don't think it's a huge surprise, but I know that sometimes things feel different on the ground. But Santa Cruz County overall is a relatively modest growth county compared to the state. You can see here the growth over the past decade or so, almost double the rate statewide as compared to here in Santa Cruz County. And Watsonville a little bit slower even than county-wide, which is surprising because usually when you're growing smaller population numbers, the percentage growth is a bit higher. So you look at the line mapping the population of Watsonville in recent years, and you can see that growth. But you can also see in the last few years that a little fall off in the population. So You know, I know sometimes it feels like everything's booming, but you know, here the data to sort of reveal that there's a bit of a sort of slower demand for growth, and you know, it's hard to know exactly what's driving that, whether it's a supply issue or actually just a sort of you know, kind of a market that is sort of tepid to some degree. Let's keep going. Want to show this is a look at more of a policy perspective. The blue line are these regional housing needs assessment goals for the city. So this is the state and the regional planning agency setting its desired policy for new housing within the city. And city has done a really phenomenal job of bringing new housing to the city, but it is also the market and the development community to some degree that's driving this too. And so we can see here and it's true statewide that the state of California Department of Housing and Community Development sets very aggressive goals for its housing policy. And so almost every city has the challenge of meeting those goals. And one thing I'll say here, you can see coming very close in that third cycle between 2002 and 2007, quite a bit of home building and things slowing down after the Great Recession in that fourth cycle. Here in the fifth cycle, the reporting is a little bit dated. We're working off state information that's only through 2020, so it's not up to date. And the other thing in looking at these numbers with city staff is that there's quite a bit of zoning entitlement that's occurred that hasn't converted into building permits. What we're looking at here is building permits versus our housing goals. So there's a good chance that that gold line will rise for the fifth cycle, bringing the city a little closer to its goal in recent years. But you can see hanging out there, these aren't finalized yet, but really ambitious housing goals for the city expected in the coming decade. Keep going. A little bit of a real estate perspective now. We're looking specifically at charting related to what's called multifamily residential rental housing. And so that's your in lay terms, your big apartment building. These are apartment buildings with 5 or more units. So it's more like the major projects. And you can see over the last couple of decades, we've had a couple of little booms. After during the housing boom of the early 2000s, we got a couple hundred units added to the city's inventory. And then in the last 10 years or so, in the sort of expanded boom that we've had or sort of growth cycle, again, another couple hundred units added to the city's housing stock in this sort of multifamily category. I do want to point out also, you look at the rental rate side, that yes, we are seeing price increases, and I know that is a challenge for a lot of renters trying to make ends meet. But I want to also point out that it's not, to my assessment, sort of runaway rent escalation in Watsonville. When we compare the way rents have gone up compared to inflation, they're not really keeping pace with inflation. So it's actually been pretty modest, from that perspective, modest pricing increases on these rents. And so I know there's statewide a housing crisis, and we're facing aggressive goals for housing. But my observation is that in Watsonville, it's been relatively stable. We don't see the crunch with the spiking rents that we see in other areas. So just I know that the people are going to have their own sort of perspective and certainly know people who have had a different story, but the data averages suggest a pretty modest increase in rental rates in these new projects over the last 20 years or so. Okay, we can keep going. Downtown has this concentration of apartment buildings now. You can see here, if you look at these columns, I know it's we've got the bars and we've got the columns, but really 60% of the housing units in the downtown, that's a distribution kind of vertically, are apartments or are condominiums, a sort of what we call an attached or multifamily housing product. And as compared with the city or the county, as I'm sure you'd sort of logically conclude, the downtown is the place for this kind of this kind of dense housing. And what we see is that there is this market for housing that is affordable by design, smaller units, smaller living. You can have higher rents on a per square foot basis, but the overall rents for a modest sized unit can be pretty reasonable. So all that to say, we have this kind of functioning market for apartment buildings in the downtown, which makes it a good place to think about adding more. Let's keep going. Just a quick example here on the next slide of one of the projects, and I know we have the development team in the room, so I'm sure they'll have some comments to make about this. But again, it's just an example of a recent success, I think, on the development side and within the city for multifamily apartment living. The project succeeds because it's well amenitized. It makes small living livable, and that keeps the rents down in an absolute term. But like I say, you buy buildings and you build buildings on a per square foot basis. So if you can live with a little bit of less space, it's more cost efficient. So those smaller units are an effective approach here. And then also this project takes advantage of a mix of structured parking and surface parking, just kind of varies the cost of that parking, which made it, I think, more feasible at the time. So, I think everyone's well aware of this project. I think Mr. Hansen has it as his icon here tonight. It's a great project, and we hope for more of this. Okay, let's keep going. We're going to look at a map next of affordable housing. The example I just gave was a market rate project. The city is very active promoting and supporting below market rate housing citywide. We have Carlos Landaveri on the line here. He's going to talk in a minute more about these housing programs, but you can see on the left, almost 600 units spread throughout the city now, and a plethora on the right of affordable housing projects that are in the pipeline, bringing below market rate, deed restricted below market rate housing to Watsonville. And so that's affordable housing that stays affordable in the long term, exclusively for families that income qualify. And Carlos will talk more about that. So hopefully that's good, kind of very quick overview context, and we'll get into some of the great things the city is doing around affordable housing next, I believe. Oh, no, but still me. Okay. We're going to do what we heard. This is the part I've been waiting for. I know we've gotten a little bit of feedback already. I tried to skip it. I'm not going to be able to. No, we have been listening and listening and listening as part of this specific plan process. And what you're seeing here on the page, and not the opinions of this consultant team or of the city, they're really reflecting back to you, the community in Watsonville, what you're telling us over the course of this process. Housing is a huge priority for this project, as Susie mentioned at the beginning. We're looking to introduce a suite of housing that covers the full spectrum of affordability. So, and what I'm trying to say is that's what you're looking for. So affordable housing, affordable by design housing, and honestly, luxury housing likely part of the picture as well too. Active ground floors, this is a downtown, it's the heart of the community. That's a desire. We heard some, this point here about reduced parking requirements. It's really a comment about creating incentives, finding ways to make the projects financially viable, to move them forward faster. Jobs are important. The economy is important. Local business is important. That's all in here. And I think maintaining this this diversity, this cultural diversity, is paramount. That's coming through in the comments as well. Let's go to the next page about gentrification and displacement. Okay, we hear you loud and clear. We don't want to lose our people. We don't want to lose our business. We don't want to lose the character, the authenticity that downtown has now. So the challenge we all face is creating a plan that allows people to stay, businesses to stay, but also supports reinvestment and injects new vibrancy, new activity, more housing, and more economic activity into the downtown. So I think that we are talking tonight about housing, avoiding displacement, avoiding some of the negative effects of gentrification. And so that is what we hear from you, and what we're trying to address best we can through the research we've done and the discussion we're going to have this evening.
Thank you, Ben. We're going to take a very, very brief pause. We're having some issues with recording that we are trying to fix. So we'll take a very brief pause while Jasmine and Elena troubleshoot that. And then Carlos will go over some of the. Jasmine, just let us know when we can get going again.
Just a moment. Okay, we can keep going now. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos, with that great pause, now you're on deck.
Now I am on the line. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Carlos Landaverri, Housing Manager in the Community Development Department. And I'd like to start with our Affordable Housing Ordinance. Many of you may know that we've had an ordinance for quite some time, but it was first established in 1991. And for the next few years, despite that we had an earthquake and we were in a housing crisis, we saw very little development. What we know about that ordinance is that it required 25% of any new development to have 25% of those units be affordable. And it established or used the income limits from the Santa Cruz County median income to establish sales prices and income eligibility requirements. So at the end of the 90s, we saw very little development. Most of the affordable housing that was developed was done by nonprofit developers. So the city council established a housing commission to review the existing ordinance and to make recommendations to the city council. So in 2001, we have, and we can go to the next slide, please. In 2001, the city council adopted our current housing ordinance. Our current ordinance sets the standards for home ownership projects, for rental projects. It bases the resale prices and income eligibility based on Watsonville income limits, which in essence says that we take 70% of the Santa Cruz County median income and we set our own Watsonville limits. It also establishes in lieu fees for smaller projects, and it adds some incentives to promote more development. Next. And so on our current ordinance, any project that has between 7 and 50 units is required to have 15% of those units available to Watsonville residents. And it's divided into 3 different income categories: median, moderate, and above moderate. Large projects of 50 units or more, they're required to have 20% of those units be affordable to Watsonville residents. And for our rental projects, 7 units or more, 20% of those units must be available to Watsonville residents. The rental projects, or the income requirement or the income limit, is divided into 4 sections. Those rental units have to be available to low, very low, median income residents, and also be available to Section 8 voucher holders. Okay, next. For small projects, 6 units or less, the developer has the option to pay an in lieu fee or to provide an affordable unit, either at the median income limit for rental projects or above moderate for the sale developments. For projects that propose 100% affordable units, we also provide them with priority processing, and they can get direct financial assistance from the city. Next. And so that's our inclusionary housing ordinance, our deed restricted units or our affordable units. And, depending when we are in time and space, those terms are used interchangeably right now, or in very recent past, we could not use affordable units. In Watsonville, when people ask me if we're still affordable, I tell them yes, because we do have affordable units, meaning that Watsonville residents can afford to buy or to rent. And what we cannot accomplish with our affordable housing ordinance and the restricted units that we have in place, we also provide financial assistance to our home buyers. We have two programs that do pretty much the same thing, but I will distinguish them because it's necessary to do so. The first one is the first-time home buyer program. It provides financial assistance for first-time home buyers to buy their first home. And being a first-time home buyer really means that you haven't had any interest in any residential property in the past 3 years. And so if you meet our income eligibility requirements, you have a 3% cash investment or your own money for your down payment, and you meet some other criteria, then we can get you into a house. We make it affordable like that. Next, our next program is the down payment assistance program. And under this program, we run it. It's very identical to the first-time home buyer program, with the exception that this one is funded with local funds. And we can help people or residents that make a little more. They're not considered low-income residents. They can be moderate income or even above moderate income. So to give you an example, a family of 5, mom, dad, and 3 kids, they can make up to $141,000 and they can buy an above moderate unit. The catch with this program is that it has to be used in conjunction with our affordable units. It has to be a deed restricted unit. So a family of 5 that makes more than the average family in town, but cannot afford to buy a market rate unit, they can buy an above moderate unit. And we, on top of that, we can also give them financial assistance for the down payment so they can get into their first house. The other eligibility requirements must be met. They have to be first-time home buyers. They have to come in with 3% of their own money, but we can make it happen. That's how we make it affordable. Next, we also have, for people that already have their own house, but they're having financial difficulties and they need to do repairs on their homes, we have a housing rehabilitation program. And we've done it both for owner-occupied units and also for rental housing. And so if a homeowner, typically seniors on fixed income, they have their home, they own their home, but they cannot make repairs, then we can come in, we can provide the financial assistance to help them do the repairs, but we can also, we become the project managers. We help them to select a local contractor, and we oversee the entire construction process. This loan is a 0 interest loan. They don't have to make any payments until they sell the house or they transfer title. So it's a wonderful program. Next. And right now, given the emergencies, we are operating an emergency rental assistance program. This program is being funded by our Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. This was a special allocation that we received from the federal government. The City Council approved the use of this money to help local Watsonville tenants that have been affected by the COVID-19 crisis. So under this program, we're helping tenants with 1 to 3, up to 3 months of rent. They have to be low income. They have to live in Watsonville. The unit has to be in Watsonville, and they have to had experienced either a loss or reduction of income due to COVID-19. And right now we're processing a lot of applications, and Administrative Analyst Elena, she's here with us. She oversees that program. And so that's what we're doing right now to help our local residents. And that concludes.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you. Are we doing questions or we're going to go until the end?
We'll do questions now, and if there's quite a few attendees, so if you can use the raise hand command. If I can't see you, that way I'll make sure I catch you. I see you, Manny. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question? But for others, if you have questions, please raise your hand in the using the tool command on your Zoom.
Thank you. On those programs that the city's offering, aside from the rent subsidies, do you have numbers that we can see as far as what has been working? I'm assuming these have been in place for 20 or maybe 15 years for the first-time home buyer. And the reason I ask that, it would make sense to look at the programs that are successful and maybe getting rid of the ones that are not successful. And just to give us an idea of what we're looking at.
Sure. So I can tell you what we have. So the programs, the first-time homebuyer program has been in effect since 1992. We have assisted over 300 families. We have about 250 plus restricted units, but over 300 current loans, outstanding loans out there. And we have helped a lot of other families, but as people refinance, or they sell, they move, they can pay us off and then we can reuse that money. But we have over 300 right now out there.
So about 10 a year.
Yeah, lately it's been about 10 a year, depending on the availability of the units. But what's interesting, what's important is that depending on the housing market, we have our restricted units, but with the first-time homebuyer program, we can also help our local residents buy a market rate unit. And what we're doing right now is because the prices are so high, now we're able to combine 2 or 3 different funding sources to still make that purchase affordable to a local resident. So we can provide, typically we look at 25% of the purchase price. And with that, with no PMI, we can help the family get into a market rate unit.
But does it look like it's higher this year than it has been in previous years? Because I'm just looking at the expenses that the city's operating this program, and on the back end of it, how much is that costing the city to administer 10 loans per year?
So let me put it this way. It's not if we issue 10 first-time home buyer loans, but the housing division doesn't. We don't just do loans. So for every loan that we produce 1 year, we have to service that loan. We have to monitor those units year after year. And so we have to do marketing. We have to do a lot of outreach. We have to produce materials. We do everything we have is in English and Spanish. At the same time, we have to look for funding. We have to report on the existing fundings we have. We have funds from the city, our local money. We have funds from the federal government, and we get funds from the state government. And on all of those programs, all of those grants, we have to apply for funds, reapply every year, have plans on how we use that money. We have to report every year. On most of our programs, we have to report quarterly on how we use that money, any money that comes in and how we use it. So it's a lot more than just producing loans or just selling houses. That's one, just on the programs side. On the development side, we also have to work with the local developers. You saw the map with all the what's going on right now. We have to work with them. We have to make sure that those projects come in and they have to comply with our local ordinance. If a project requires 15% of those units to be affordable, we have to get those agreements going. We have to monitor those units on a yearly basis. A lot of times we end up talking to people that need to get into housing or they need to buy housing, and holding hands is what takes the most of our time. We get people prepared, we get them ready so they can buy or they can rent, but we also advise them on many, many different issues. And it's just, this is the proper and also the time to let you know that we don't do that all by ourselves. We also collaborate with a lot of nonprofits in the area and legal services, because a lot of our people, it's not just about getting into a rental unit or buying a house. A lot of them need financial counseling, they need legal counseling, they need a lot of other things. So it's a very robust program that is very inclusive. And when people ask me, I usually tell people our housing division is a full service division, which means we have every program active when it comes to development, loans, to buy, to rent. We're starting a program for ADUs, but we do all of that in-house. We do the eligibility, we do the certifying, we do the monitoring, we write all the grant applications, we do all of the reporting. We do everything here. So it's quite a lot. So thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Crystal, do you have a question, specific question? If you can make it quick so we can move on to the next part of the presentation.
I don't know if you know this information off the top of your head, but you mentioned housing developers who developed units for sale, that they had, if it was 50 units, they had a certain percentage to make. Do you know the last time a developer who was developing housing that was for sale developed more than 50 units when that last housing development occurred in Watsonville?
So we have two currently. Right behind Target, we have Sunshine Gardens, that's 87 units. And Hillcrest Estates, that was approved for 150 units, and it went down to 144 for sale units.
Great,
and
thank
the one
you.
after that one currently is the one on Airport, but that one is actually 48, so it's not quite 50.
40. Thank you very much, Carlos.
Thank you.
Ellie, go ahead very briefly, and then Sean, if you can hold your question till a little bit later on in the presentation.
Awesome, thank you, Carlos. I wanted to know if you knew numbers, how much on average a family of 5 makes in Watsonville, because I know recently I wanted to verify that you told me that 73% of all residents are considered low income in Watsonville. I appreciate the work that you do. It sounds like 2 or 3 different funding programs to help one family get market rate just really shows how much our city is already struggling with housing. And I want to know if there's some sort of solution-based plan, or if we can create one so that we can address the ordinances and potentially be able to help people afford to live here so that we don't keep losing our population.
Yes, so briefly, thank you for your question. We have to distinguish between what the government, what the HCD at the state and the federal government, how those numbers trickle down. The numbers for some of our funding sources, and when I gave you income limits for a family of 5, and we talked about above moderate income for a family of 5 in Watsonville, that's the maximum income limit that a family can make. And so 141,000 was under the Watsonville income limits for a family of 5. That's the maximum that they can make. But the reality in Watsonville is that the median income here, it's about 55,000. Okay. So it doesn't go that high. About 70, and we're gonna get better numbers once the census data comes in. But about 73% of our residents are low income, which means that they make below 80% of the county's median income. But the median income for a family of 4, that's $111,000 for a family of 4. So not a lot of families make that much. And so 73% of our residents are considered low income, meaning most families of 4 would make less than $111,000 per year. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, a little bit. Thank you. I'm just wondering if it would be like long-term solutions, if it would be better to invest in affordable housing, and then we wouldn't need to work so hard in all of these different funding programs, if instead we invest into getting something that our community can afford.
Ellie, thank you for your comment. I think
Thank you.
that's a question that we are all trying to address and struggle to find the right way forward. And it's going, in our mind, it's a combination of a lot of different things. So as we go through the presentation, there are new ideas as well that other cities are trying, that we are considering here in Watsonville, as well as the very extensive programs that are already in place that Carlos just described. So thank you. So now we wanted to switch to describing some of the new state legislation that has been put in place over the last, especially the last 5 years, with regard to housing. And the state essentially acknowledged that there's the need for significantly more housing, both market rate and affordable. And in order to make it happen, the state has passed numerous new laws. And this next section gives a very brief overview of what these laws are and what they're intended to achieve. I won't go through the details, as each one of these laws can be an hour-long presentation by themselves. So I'm going to give you at a very high level what all of these mean. So some of the most important changes that the state has made have been to the state density bonus law. Now, this law has been in effect since 1976, but these recent laws have really made it much more robust. This law and the recent changes provide developers with tools to encourage the development of affordable and senior housing, including up to a 50% increase in project densities for most projects, depending on the level of affordability. The second law that is beginning to show major impact is related to reducing the time it takes for housing projects to be approved. This law, known as the Housing Crisis Act, was first adopted as SB 330, and it has been modified several times since. SB 330 also modified 2 other laws that I'll talk about briefly, and which then established the timelines that the cities need to follow for approving projects. The HCA, or Housing Crisis Act, also limited downzoning and limited cities from using growth control measures to prevent the development of housing. A key component of the HCA is to require that cities or other jurisdictions have objective design standards for housing developments that make it harder for cities to arbitrarily deny projects on the basis of design. The HCA also made changes to the Housing Accountability Act by expanding which projects it applies to. Now, all multifamily projects and all mixed-use projects which have at least 2/3 residential can take advantage of its provisions, and these provisions include streamlining and limits to density reduction that cities may impose based on subjective criteria. Another law that has been focused on making the process more efficient for the approval of affordable housing developments is SB 35, if certain conditions are met. The time that jurisdictions have to review projects and provide approval ministerially is very limited. And the goal of SB 335 was to speed up housing production by limiting and streamlining the approval process. Another law that went into effect just this year is SB 9. And SB 9 allows parcels that have single-family zoning to be split into 2 lots and a duplex built on each. So essentially, a single-family lot can have hypothetically, up to 4 units. This is a complex law, and it probably will not see the widespread changes to single-family neighborhoods as anticipated because of all the various criteria that are listed within it. But it is a tool that cities are grappling with in terms of how to allow for more housing to be developed in single-family neighborhoods. SB 9 also has measures to prevent displacement by requiring owner occupancy for a certain number of years after this lot split or duplex construction takes place. Other laws that I'll briefly cover, SB 791 requires that city offer any surplus land that they own to affordable housing developers for housing projects. SB 10 and SB 478 also are written to ensure that zoning actually allows for housing to be produced as intended, that cities don't use development standards to limit the maximum amount of housing units that the density for that specific zone allows. SB 10 allows cities to increase density in the areas around transit. These 6 laws on here, and I won't go through each one of these in the interest of time, provide a range of ways to fund affordable housing projects. And they do that with grants, expanding tax credits, limiting fees, and providing new incentives for affordable housing as well as workforce housing. Many of these laws have a component that address anti-displacement and tenant protections. SB 330, or the Housing Crisis Act, requires that replacement housing be provided if there were existing units on site and those units were provided by a low-income household in the previous 5 years. AB 1482 provides rent stabilization, which limits the amount landlords can increase rent annually. And it also requires just cause for evictions and for landlords to pay a relocation fee if they are converting the property to a condo or need to do renovation and need the property vacated. And finally, SB 329 prohibits discrimination against tenants paying for housing with public assistance, for example, with Section 8 vouchers. In addition to all the laws I just described, the state has also made many changes to what cities are required to address in their housing elements. Housing elements are required components of a city's general plan, and these must be updated every 8 years. The city of Watsonville will be updating their housing element in the next year or so. It goes into effect in 23. And that update process will take into account all these new laws. This update process will also allow the city to consider other citywide programs and policies to address the housing needs of the community. So this was a very brief summary of recent state laws, and now I will turn this back over to Ben to discuss his findings about what other communities in California are doing to address the housing issues that we are all facing here in the state.
Thank you, Simran. Quiz at the end, right, on all the housing legislation. It's like drinking from a fire hose for even the folks who do this for their day job. Okay, let's dive in here. So we started off by looking at a number of policy papers, sort of white papers that are out there, sort of folks who are thinking hard about how to handle housing issues and displacement pressures that new plans, new development can bring. And so I just wanted to, at the beginning here, kind of lay out a framework for thinking about the range of opportunities. So let's look at that first slide here, slide 48. Okay, so we found that across a lot of the academic work and professional work in this field, that the programs and policies that cities are pursuing and implementing around avoiding displacement include these four groups you're looking at here: production of new housing, preservation of existing housing, neighborhood stabilization, so things we can do to keep tenants in their homes, and then household assistance, the financial support, so on rent or home buying, or even mortgage assistance. And I just want to sort of pause and say, wow, that kind of looks like an overview of Carlos's presentation, because really the city of Watsonville has been doing this for years. And so one of the challenges we face is how to sort of focus these efforts downtown, and we'll talk a bit about that in a moment. I want to just make sure our audience is kind of comfortable with the content, though. So what we're going to do is we'll roll through sort of big picture examples of each of these types of anti-displacement policy and program, and then we're going to look at some specific examples that different cities, what they've done at the specific plan level of urban planning to integrate these programs into their sort of policy for a sub area location within their city. So let's go to housing production. So we're talking about requiring that developers build affordable housing into their projects like Watsonville does now, or pay fees in lieu often of including affordable housing. The community benefits programs as sort of bonuses. So the state has their own bonus program that we just talked about. It's been enriched to even greater degrees to promote affordable housing development in California. And we see other cities where they have very strong markets pursuing for yet more bonus opportunities where density is worth money. It's called a value capture approach. The city can take some of that value created from letting developers build denser and put it back into the community in the form of affordable housing. We see cities passing new taxes to fund affordable housing, transfer fees, business taxes, bond measures. In the state of California, we put a lot of pressure on the private sector and developers in particular to fund affordable housing. It's arguably a societal burden, and a bond measure spreads the cost of affordable housing across whole communities. And that's always a possibility. There are examples of bond measures for affordable housing being passed throughout California. Housing trust funds, really just a way to kind of organize yourself around pooling funds for affordable housing. A lot of expedited permitting approaches basically lower the cost at the margin, helps move these housing projects along. And then we see more and more, and I'll talk about this when we get into the examples, the use of public land to support affordable housing projects. And really the state's Surplus Land Act has gone a long way towards requiring that, as well as cities surplus extra land. It's required they put it out to the affordable housing development community first. And so we see that happening. Try to do these a little quicker. Let's keep going. Housing preservation slide is next. Some things we see out there, restricting the conversion of rentals to condos that can be profitable and reduces affordability. Protection of single room occupancy housing. It's an important segment of housing for populations that of sort of particularly low income. We do see cities partnering with affordable housing partners to rehab existing housing rather than build new. There can be some cost efficiencies there. We talked about replacement requirements. That's part of some of the new legislation. So if you're going to develop a site that has housing, giving some precedent to the existing tenants or mostly tenants to come back at similar prices. And then demolition ordinances also can help preserve housing, making it a little bit harder to or giving cities a little bit more purview of demolition and when it should and should not happen. On the stabilization, we've talked about a few of these rent control policies out there. The state has now legislation that introduces some of that for all cities, various tenant protections and just cause eviction policies, counseling and education, as well as code enforcement actually getting out there and making sure that landlords aren't misbehaving with their tenants. Let's keep going. The household assistance programs, Carlos touched on a lot of what the city's already doing in this area. Rental assistance, relocation assistance, homeowner assistance, first-time home buyer programs, and then funds for rehabilitation. I think the city's doing almost all these things already. Okay. And the last, but not, oh, what was that? Did we miss one? Perhaps not. Okay. I think we're good. Sorry about that. Okay, going into the case studies now. I just want to start out at the beginning by saying there's no place like Watsonville. All right, you know, we're not trying to pick cities that look like you or impose their values on you. When we cast our net looking for specific plans with some interesting anti-displacement policies and affordable housing policies in them, we're just looking for good ideas. And so we're laying out some of what we found here. I know, you know, these are communities that have moved forward with plans recently that have a pretty rich sort of policy and program offering to address affordability and any displacement. So that's why we've selected them really for no other reason. And so we're just trying to kind of pull from these, like I say, some innovative, progressive thinking around what could be done. So looking at Livermore first here, really the takeaway on this one is that they created a higher goal for affordable housing within their plan area, that they sort of typically citywide are looking for 20% affordable housing within their housing development mix. Here they're looking for 25, and they set out to achieve that by targeting the plan, sort of prioritizing it a bit, if you will, for the city's affordable housing funds. And then they have some significant public land within the plan area that they hope to use for affordable housing. And so really through inclusionary sort of policy, along with promoting 100% affordable projects, they're striving for this higher 25% goal of affordable housing. I think that one thing to just note throughout all of these examples is that we do note that cities use the specific plan and the section they devote to affordable housing and any displacement, really to just sort of reiterate a lot of what they're doing already. So an example here is that, you know, they say city partnerships with affordable housing developers, including subsidy funding. That's something they're doing citywide. They also sort of restate it as something they'll be doing within the plan area. They're really not doing anything different. And then I think also here, you know, they do have this kind of preservation piece. You know, there it's mobile homes, and so that, you know, they're recognizing there are folks in quality housing that will stay, as you know, even though there's a bold vision for reinvestment in an area, it doesn't mean everything goes away. It's not these are, you know, to some degree infill projects and plans. They're not scrape everything and start new. All right, let's keep going. We're on to Sacramento. This is Stockton Boulevard plan. It's ongoing. So at this point, the city's really kind of just throwing ideas at the wall to see what sticks. So this is none of this has been sort of integrated into their plan yet. They've got a white paper out there that's thinking through the issues. I found it interesting here, the mixed income housing ordinance. I know getting that range of incomes is you know, a priority in Watsonville. So that sort of resonated. Like I say, you know, using existing programs like subsidies for housing improvement is part of this. What's interesting here, a couple over on, you know, appropriately or maybe not under neighborhood stabilization, this community benefits agreement, you'll see that discussed in some contexts. That's really for your sort of major project that requires a significant entitlement. There can be in the instances where there's a development agreement with the city that's sought by the developer, there can be some leverage to negotiate some funding or to improve the project's contribution to community priorities such as affordable housing. And then this land trust concept has also kind of come up a few times, and this is really just a way for, it's really a cooperative in which people can buy into housing at a reasonable cost, and then when they sell, they're limited to some degree in terms of the appreciation they're allowed to take out of the house. But it's you know, a model that I think is gaining some traction nationally, but it's still pretty rare. All right, let's keep going. Berkeley, so very ambitious target for affordable housing. They have their 20% citywide inclusionary requirement, and they hope to, across the entire plan, achieve nearly half of it in affordable housing. And I think that it's really, you know, setting a very high bar for themselves. And they hope to do, this is a place where they, you know, they have passed transfer fees that go to affordable housing, pretty significant additional taxes, and they have a housing trust fund, so they're generating local funds. So that combined with the presence of public land, public sites within their plan area, I think they are, you know, they're able to be so bold. They're kind of in a unique position. But the takeaway here is just that, again, they have their kind of base target for affordable housing within the plan area, and then look to augment that with 100% affordable housing projects, largely brought by the not-for-profit community. This is also an area where the market, the winds of the market are at their back. There is a lot of value in density. It is closer to the sort of urban core of Northern California. And so they are pursuing these bonus programs, that kind of thing. Not something we end up recommending on for this downtown, but we can talk more about that certainly. I think over on neighborhood stabilization here, this prioritization or emphasis on existing, current, and former residents is interesting. It's challenging to actually implement that, but certainly the plan, you know, at least has a narrative around that being important. And then one thing I pull out of this also, I think, is something we actually bring to bear here in our recommendation for Watsonville, is this education component at the bottom of the neighborhood stabilization bullets. It's, you know, there are a lot of times we have relatively complex programs, and people don't necessarily know what they are, understand them. And so I think, Carlos, you may have said something like you're doing a lot of talking to people and helping them understand what's available to them, and that I think that is part of the opportunity here, is helping our community understand what programs they may be able to apply for, may be eligible for. And so that education outreach pieces, we sort of thought that was a good idea. Okay, moving on to Oakland. This also is ongoing. They don't, you know, this, I think they have a draft plan out. I know they do have a draft plan out. So this is in the draft, but it hasn't been adopted yet. Sort of full suite of things. So one here, you know, they have a situation where within Oakland, they have sort of competition for funding across different areas of town, and they do actually have criteria to sort of give downtown a little bit of you know, extra points when it comes to winning funding. And we thought that was a really neat idea, but we talked it through with the city, and the situation in Watsonville doesn't really lend itself to that approach. The city very much is taking on every funding, you know, opportunity to fund affordable housing that it can. And at the moment, there isn't a desire within the city to start prioritizing different parts of town. We all want to sort of have all the neighborhoods share equally in the benefits of what the housing department is doing. And so we thought that was cool, but doesn't really work here. Again, we see this idea that public housing, or excuse me, public land can be used for housing. And they have this neat idea in Oakland of trying to combine some of the public facilities they're needing with affordable housing. So the plan seeks to potentially combine libraries with affordable housing and senior centers with affordable housing. And I know from working a bit with affordable housing developers, those kinds of mixed uses can create challenges and can limit you know, how you approach the funding mix a project gets. But you know, there may be some opportunities there in some cases. I thought also here in Oakland, interesting, they call out specifically the desire for single room occupancy preservation. It, clearly identified as a type of housing that is important in the community. So let's keep going. We're on to Fresno. This is a downtown plan as well. Here, I think interesting. I mean, like we have in our plan, some single family at the periphery of downtown, ripe for a little bit of densification with the accessory dwelling units. State law has made that easier to do. Carlos, good to hear that the city is also pursuing kind of some sort of streamlining program to promote that kind of additional housing where we've got single family units now. There's a piece here about incentives. So again, it's kind of, I always, when I'm talking about affordable housing, I mean, there's where are you going to get the money and what are you going to do? So, I think when we get into the conversation later, we're going to have a lot of great ideas about how to spend money, and we'll just have to think about, where that money might come from. That's going to be a constraint we face, but they are looking to spend a little money on incentives, continue, so subsidies and partnerships, just like City of Watsonville is doing now. On this list, one thing that is kind of interesting is this, the last point on the left side around tax increment. That's essentially the city's willingness to consider putting property tax revenue into infrastructure and other community building. That can be helpful, can reduce the city's reliance on development impact fees and other sources of funding infrastructure that come out of, that become a development cost for home builders. And then the last thing I want to kind of touch on this slide is just this neighborhood stabilization piece. When I first read this part of their plan, I felt like, oh gosh, they've got this displacement task force. It's going to track displacement on an annual basis during plan implementation. If there's a problem, they'll figure out how to address it. And I was thinking, gosh, seems like they're really kicking the can down the road with that. But I do think there's something to the idea of creating an entity that kind of tracks what's happening on the ground as the plan is underway, and and intervening if necessary. Okay, let's keep going. One more, potential policies. All right, so I gave this overview at the beginning about the 4 major categories of kind of policy and program. And what I want to point out, I mean, the examples we just went through really each showed the full suite of housing production, preservation, stabilization, and household assistance. We sort of were able to find a thread of each of them in the all the categories. But like I said, a lot of it is really just sort of restating what the city's already doing at a citywide level and saying we'll continue that within the plan area. So when we think about what are we really going to do in a specific plan that is different from citywide policy, I really break it out in these two, these two sort of groups you're seeing here, with the production and preservation programs and policies really relating to what's going to happen in a specific plan area. Whereas those neighborhood stabilization and assistance programs, they're much more cost effective at the sort of citywide or regional level. And I think that may go to Manny's point earlier question. I mean, you got a program that appears, gosh, it's a lot of administrative work to run something like this for the city. Imagine what it'd be like doing it just for your downtown. So we're really going to focus in the recommendations here in the next couple of slides on production and preservation, knowing the city already is very active in its efforts around neighborhood stabilization and assistance. So let's do the punchline here. All right, so we're not looking here to sort of blow you away, right? We are trying to be practical. Much of the things the city can be doing around affordability and in displacement, it's already doing. What we want to do is sort of leverage that great housing department that you have functioning now. So we want to continue the inclusionary housing policy downtown, obviously, and we want to promote 100% affordable projects, and that city's already doing that. And I think there's a lot of great opportunity to keep doing that in the downtown. Continue to be where we can, using housing funds, channeling federal, state, and other local dollars into affordable housing, matching funds of various kinds, and trying to get those into projects downtown. There is, going to the third point here, some potential down the road that the city may seek to redevelop portions of its civic campus, at which point it may be appropriate to add affordable housing of some kind to the program mix. They may be separate, buildings or this kind of thing, but there's some public land downtown, and we're seeing city after city in these examples saying housing is such a priority that cities are willing to use their own land to support housing goals. And then this is really just a continuation of what the city is already doing, but there is the desire to keep using low interest deferred loans for development impact fees. A lot of times as a developer is essentially funding and financing their project, those fees can come at a really bad time when you have to spend a lot of money and you don't have any revenues. So a city program that allows deferred payment of fees can really help when there's a kind of cash flow constraint associated with a new project. So we think that's all good, all good stuff that can be applied downtown. We got a few more on the next slide. In terms of preservation, we do want to acknowledge that there's really some quite good housing stock that exists downtown. Some of it may need reinvestment to improve it to a more livable standard. But like I said earlier, this is not a plan where anyone's thinking developers come in and scrape everything and it's all brand new. So a recommendation we have is that we really do, the city in partnership with not-for-profits, pursue saving housing that's worth saving, reinvesting in it and keeping it affordable. New construction has gotten to a point in terms of construction costs where it's very challenging to make projects pencil. And so taking advantage of existing housing where it's where possible makes a lot of sense. And we do see cities that are actively doing this now. And then in terms of stabilization and assistance, like I said, the idea here is not to create some new administrative burden that's focused on the downtown, but to continue the citywide housing programs Carlos described, and get out there and help people, residents of the downtown and others who might participate in downtown's revitalization, understand the opportunities that are there for first-time homebuyer programs and other programs that'll benefit them. So with all that, I think I'm going to stop talking. I'm very, very interested in having a dialogue with this group about all these topics, and I'm happy to go back to any of the slides that folks have questions about.
Thank you, Ben. Let's see. I'm sure you have questions. Manny, I'll let you go first again. And then I'd like to see if advisory committee members have questions and comments first before we have the members of the public ask theirs. So go ahead, Manny.
Okay, thank you. So I got involved in this. I've served in various different committees in the past 30 years in downtown. And it's been always a constant battle revitalizing the downtown. The city, in my opinion, hasn't done a great job. They've struggled through the years, and a lot of the initiatives that were put forward have been non-effective. Some of them have been effective. But one of the problems that I think that we need to look at is mixed use of the downtown. And up till about 5-7 years ago, I understand financing was very hard to get to do mixed uses for businesses and apartment buildings in the downtown. My question, it might be for Susie, has the city looked at lifting the height restrictions of the buildings in the downtown corridor? I understand there's a 75-foot height limit.
Yes, thanks, Manny. That is one thing that we have discussed in past advisory committee meetings.
Okay. Thank you.
Neva.
So I have like an observation and a question. In going through and hearing the presentation, it seems to all be focused on placing low-income housing in the downtown, when the downtown is already, the majority of housing is low income. And that's not being addressed here in this information. There is one market rate apartment building, well, two, a smaller one in the downtown, with the rest already being low income. So what I'm hearing here, and the comparisons in some of the creative ideas into bringing more, are from much larger cities that aren't comparable to Watsonville. I mean, we're not seeing anything from Gilroy or Hollister or Salinas, which I think would be more comparable to what Watsonville is and what they've done in the revitalization of their downtowns. So I have a great concern here. For a thriving downtown, we need all kinds of levels of housing. We need a multi-housing plan and not just a low income. And that's what this focus has been. It's been all low income in the downtown, when that's what we have as the majority right now. So why hasn't that been addressed of what's already in the downtown?
Thank you for your comment, Neva. The intent of the presentation is to, maybe we didn't come through as intended, is to talk about increased production of housing, period. And affordable housing and low-income housing is a component of that. I don't think there's any, the specific plan is planning on limiting new housing to a certain type of housing. The city's inclusionary housing ordinance already requires a portion of any project to have affordable component, and that's what's being will continue to be implemented here. Ben, you might have other thoughts in response to Neva's comments as well. One question I have for you, Neva, is: are there policies or programs in Gilroy or Hollister that you think should be applicable here? And we'd love to hear from you as to what those are. And go ahead, Ben.
Well, being that you guys are the ones doing the information and the studying of this, and the consultants, I would think you would have that information. I have not gone out and personally have sought it in the details that you are, but I'm saying the demographics of those cities are very comparable to ours, and they have downtowns that are being revitalized as well, and have been successful with it. So I would think that we'd want to look at those. But again, you guys are the consultants. This is what you do, what the city's paying you to do, to bring that information forward. So I'm just saying, what I'm hearing is, yes, we want to have all different kinds of housing in the downtown. It's not part of this presentation. This presentation is all about low income and about what we can do to get that more into the downtown and not displace people. So I can tell you from our development that we did in the downtown, we haven't displaced anybody. We've given people a place to be in the downtown that was greatly needed. So I just have a concern with, if we're going to talk about housing, we need to talk about all of it and not just one segment of it, and that's low income.
Do I understand correctly that the purpose of this meeting was affordable housing strategy?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. Neva, thank you for the comment, and I think we sounds like we do have a common understanding. The question tonight is about providing affordable housing and solving issues related to displacement that might occur should the sort of full intent of the plan come to fruition, with significant private investment in market rate housing. And so we've really taken that slice of the plan around this particular problem and tried to cast a broad net to determine what other cities are doing specifically on affordable housing and anti-displacement. there's absolutely no doubt that there's a much bigger conversation to be had around creating the right environment to foster private sector investment in the downtown. And I think if you look at some of the cities you're describing, the local planning, the sub-area planning, it's how do you create the infrastructure to take some of that cost burden off developers? How can we reduce fees to make, or defer fees to make development more feasible? It is a question of incentivizing private sector development, and that's just I think that's absolutely good conversation and good research to do. Tonight we're focused on this little sliver of the potential. What is a potential byproduct of that investment? How do we mitigate for it?
But we haven't addressed
Ben.
the majority of housing in the downtown is low income right now. That has not been addressed or acknowledged. That's what we have in the downtown right now as the majority of housing. And I think that should be, if we're talking about low income housing, that should be part of this conversation of what's already there. So it's not that low income housing hasn't been represented in the downtown. It is well represented in the downtown currently.
We've asked for those numbers.
We've actually asked for the numbers of the percentages of what it is market rate compared to low income, and the city has yet to provide those actual numbers. I think that would be helpful, especially in a conversation just like tonight that we're having. Because then, that also feeds into your strategizing.
Whenever the goal is to encourage all kinds of housing in downtown, I don't think there's any doubt on that. Yes, the exact proportion of rents levels today is an important metric to have, and we have shared it in the past in some of our previous presentations. We can maybe look that up again and share it for you again, but it is a number that keeps changing on an annual basis. So the discussion today was intended to be, as Ben just described, to be more focused on looking ahead and looking at how do we make downtown a place for everyone, both have housing which is built at market rate for lower income, and as well as at moderate income levels. Shaz, go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize. I thought this was going to be, a meeting about housing, period. But I think it is important to remember that we do need a mix of affordable and market rate housing in the downtown to provide sustainability for our downtown businesses, to support our local businesses. I also agree that if we could just step back and take a look at some cities that have kind of a comparable economic structure that we have, like Salinas and Hollister, and what they've done with their downtown revitalization, they've done a phenomenal job. If you go downtown Salinas now, it's great. It's full of diversity. It's just a beautiful place. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of add my 2 cents that I do believe that we need a mix of affordable and market rate housing to have a successful and vibrant downtown.
Thank you, Shaz.
Thank you.
Let's see, other members of the advisory committee. I can't see everyone on my screen. There's a lot of folks here, so I want to raise hands.
I'd like to.
Ellie, yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff. And then
Okay.
Ellie.
Hi, my name is Jesse Nickel. I was with Barry Swinson Builder for 35 years, so I have a lot of development experience. So if we want low-income housing, I mean, it's already kind of set in place, and we have to, for developers to invest in Watsonville into our community, we owned a house on Jefferson and Palm, and we lived in Watsonville for 5 years. So I know the community, and I'm partners with Randy Repass on a project on Main Street. And but so I think if we want developers to invest in the community, they're really going to look at cap rates, and they're going to look at debt ratios to be able to do that. And so let's take a furniture store that's been on Main Street forever. It's never had housing. And if we produce 50 housing in a mixed-use project that has retail, some sort of retail on the ground floor with parking, and we have 60 or 70 units, 15 to 20% of those are going to be low-income units. And they're usually for a long duration, or they could be forever. So if we want to have a mix of that and have, a stable place for low-income housing and mixed in with market product, we have to have a surety for the developer that he can actually get it through with not getting stuck in some political, quagmire where their money gets stuck. So if we have surety, that's really super important. And then if we have a plan that's set up that is favorable for the developer in a way that they can do it and make sure the debts aren't too out of whack, then they'll take the risk, and because they're gamblers, they're going to take the risk and go into that. So I think it's real important to have surety, have a plan that is really very clear, so they can see what the path of travel is, so they can actually get a product. And in the final outcome of that, we are going to get a certain percentage of low-income units. They're going to mix in with that. And I'm a believer of always mixing in high, low, and medium, and very low, mixing them all together, because it shows diversity in the community. So to get developers to put millions of dollars into your community, you have to make sure that that's very clear that they can actually get to the finish line and actually develop something, make sure their economic performance makes sense, so the debt ratio is viable for them to take the risk. So that's from my perspective of doing this for 35 years.
Thank you, Jesse. Ben, did you have any in response or to what
No,
Jesse
great
just
comments.
described?
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you. Jane.
Thank you. I think I was clapping instead of raising my hand. I meant to be raising the hand. Finally figured it out. So I think Salinas has done a really great job that was referenced. And I got to say, that's in large part to Taylor Farms investing in the downtown community. They put millions and millions of dollars in the downtown. They're redeveloping a lot of it. And it's a great result. And I think Salinas is doing well with their investment. I'm not sure what had happened without Taylor Farms. And from affordable housing standpoint, we have limits on what we can do as far as how high we can do in our rents. So we can't do market with moderate, we can go low and very low, but typically those higher rents, no market. Sometimes you can go up to 80%, which is low, and it's above that it's very, very difficult and not allowed. So we are dependent upon downtowns being developed with other for market rate developers like the Hanson side. Their first project there is great. I'm glad they're doing another one, and we do need that mix. But in the meantime, I don't see that we should be saying no affordable housing downtown just because there already is housing. We need as much housing as we can get. We need apartments. We need condos, we need single family houses, and we need at all income levels. So I don't want us to restrict ourselves because we feel that there's too much affordable housing downtown.
Thank you, Jane. That's the balance that the specific plan is intended to reach. I'm looking at the chat here, and Carmen, I know you're dropping some thoughts in here. Did you want to unmute yourself and share some of your thoughts as well?
Well, I think that the use of the term of affordable could be very misleading and confusing, because if we're talking about who can afford, and we need to think about what's the income of people that live in this community, and then in the income of the people that are in need of finding a home in Watsonville. And I'm talking about like people like teachers that, you know, even with having they have available, I think it's like at least 100,000, but I think it's more for a down payment through a special program for educators. And still with that, they're not able to buy a house. So it's not, when we're talking about affordable housing, we're not talking about cheap houses, you know? So I think that could be very misleading and put a lot of like stigma in the conversation about affordability.
Thank you, Carmen. Your point's well made. Jeff, I know you tried to speak earlier. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I wanted to kind of to piggyback on Carmen's comments, kind of questioning the nature of affordability and the way that we conventionally define it, and kind of think about the ways that the pandemic might impact the ways we're kind of usually measuring it. And I wanted to ask in a very open way, now that remote work is becoming a much more common thing, I'm curious if there are any like new ideas about how to reapproach this idea of like the area median income, kind of with remote work in mind, because again, returning to Carmen's comment, I can imagine a lot of ways that would distort the notion of affordable, if the definition of affordable is around an area median income.
Thank you, Jeff.
Can I just answer that?
Sure, Jane.
So the area median incomes are conducted by HUD and then by the states, both. And they're based upon the people who live in the area, not where their jobs are. So if people are working from home, they're still in the same home, so it wouldn't affect the area median income.
Yeah, and it's
I just want to do
the
a
city of
follow-up from that,
Watsonville.
because I think that if people are working from home, but they have a job that is based in an area that pays a lot more money, like the Bay Area, that does distort the affordability.
Thank you, Carmen. I think those are the cases that I'm sort of wondering about, is cases where folks can newly, can more freely live wherever they want and then be included in that area median income calculation.
And it's already happening, so.
Yeah, we see it in Santa Cruz. So, I mean, you have to say that a lot of people have moved to Santa Cruz that used to work over the hill, and that's why our area median incomes jumped. But there's not much we could do about that either.
Yeah, Ellie,
I just want to add to that, because what you're saying, that there's not much that you can do about it. The problem is not that, is that we're saying that, oh, because we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about cheap housing, and it's not the same. So affordability becomes less affordable every time. So affordable housing, it's expensive. No, it's not affordable.
So Carmen, you raised a good point. The county median income on which the affordability levels are based on is quite high because it's looking at the entire county. Now, the city has its own income levels, recognizing that the demographic in Watsonville is different than the rest of the county. So there is some acknowledgement and adjustment that's being made for the income levels because of that very reason. Now, as remote work increases and more folks from the Bay Area may end up living here and changing the median income, that is certainly something that that could occur and may already be occurring, but there's limited
Yeah, but what
options
you're
and how
saying
to
is
address
saying-
that. What
Just giving the example of Santa Cruz, but it's not just happening in Santa Cruz, it's happening here too, so.
Right. It's possibly happening in Watsonville as well. Again, I think cities can't restrict who moves in. I think what the specific plan can do is recognize that the folks moving in is going to increase the demand for housing and put upward pressure on prices, and to deal with that, downtown and the rest of the city needs to encourage more housing production at all price levels. And that's what I think NEVA has been saying, what you're saying, and what the specific plan intends to include. Ellie, I think.
I was just, let me just chime in with one little thing. I mean, we do see progressive transfer taxes, so to the degree that you have higher wage earners moving in, the AMI, the area median incomes are increasing. Those basically are just sort of the band of what's extremely low, that grows. So you have more competition essentially for the various subsidized housing and subsidized assistance programs. And so the question really becomes, how do you fund that increased need, maybe, right? Or at least one aspect of it. And I only bring up the transfer tax. It's not really a recommendation, but a Berkeley or San Francisco, where they're taking the top, the highest value real estate transactions in the city and putting a higher percentage transfer tax on those, and then channeling those, essentially channeling those funds into affordable housing and other, related programs, is one way to think about being progressive in terms of, taxing the rich and, subsidizing the housing.
Thank you, Ben. Ellie?
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation. I'm learning a lot, and I definitely agree with Carmen that this is happening now. The conversation that we seem to be having tonight, and it's based on the slides and on the plan, is that we're planning to avoid a lot of things that are already happening. When we look at the affordable pricing, that's not affordable. When I look at these new developments that are being presented, and I know that not too long ago we had the place that's being built in Main Street now, and they showed the market value, and then they showed the affordable pricing, and the affordable pricing was through the roof. It was not something that's affordable for a 55,000 median a year, right? And I know plenty of people that are already being displaced. I know that in one of the slides it said, avoid Watsonville becoming a bedroom community. We have that already. We have multiple families living in a single home because they can't afford it. And I know in my kids' schools, a lot of kids moved out because a lot of our farm workers have to move to Los Baños and drive really early in the morning to come and work here, because the farm workers and the agriculture in this town really is what makes the money. But the people that are working in the fields are not making that money, and they're already displaced. So I appreciate Carlos and all of the work that is already being done, and it's already being worked on because it's already happening. People are already being displaced. The fact that low income is what's most in downtown, I don't think that we should really focus on that, because I think that even if low income is what's the majority of downtown, we still need more of that low income, because the terrace is not affordable. It's not affordable for anyone that I know. So our community is very young and wants to stay in Watsonville. A lot of our community is agricultural workers that are already being displaced. I want to know what we can do now. I saw in a lot of the cities that Ben presented, they had like a 25% on housing. So I want to know if through this, planning for the future if we can increase the ordinance from 20% to 25%. Because when we look at the numbers and we say, okay, this many has to be affordable housing, we have to again think that, like Carmen said, affordable housing here in Watsonville is not affordable. I appreciate everybody's thoughts on it though. This is happening now. I wish we could change that. This is a very important conversation, but we keep talking about it in the future sense. When it's here, it's now, the problem is already occurring. So what can we do? We are in a housing crisis in this moment. It's not coming, it's here.
Thank you, Ellie. Ben, did you want to respond to the suggestion about increasing the affordability levels in the inclusionary housing ordinance? We have real life example right from right here in Watsonville.
Right. Yeah. No, I think there are many people in the meeting tonight who are qualified to answer this, but I'll give it a shot. In those other cities, I think a little bit of the trick that I want to make sure we're all sort of grasping is that they've got that inclusionary requirement. It's set at, it varies, but 20, kind of like Watsonville. But then what they're doing is setting a goal for affordable housing across their specific plan that's higher than that. And the idea is to make up the difference between that inclusionary number and the overall goal by promoting affordable housing in different ways, by finding ways to partner with affordable housing developers, bring more money, more funding to bear, using public land. So that's sort of one thing I just want to make sure, I think is important to clarify. Two, Carlos spoke to this at the beginning of the meeting or the middle of the meeting. Watsonville had a higher affordable housing inclusionary requirement, and it was extremely challenging for the financing and funding of projects. And we've seen this elsewhere. You're putting it above 20%. And I think HCD's guidance now is even a bit lower than 20%. You're putting a tremendous burden on the development community to pay for affordable housing. And while new housing does create, I think, some ripple effects related to housing markets, clearly the need for affordable housing isn't entirely created by real estate development. And so that's I think another consideration is just going above 20%. It just really becomes challenging to find a way to invest in housing for the private sector. Third, and others may be more qualified to speak about this than I am, but it's also a challenging moment with state regulation to change your affordable housing inclusionary requirement. My understanding is actually the guidance is it should be lower than what we currently have. So if we end up opening up that can of worms, we could actually lose ground or could end up with a lower inclusionary requirement there. I see folks sort of nodding who probably know a lot more about this than I do, but those are the 3 points I wanted to make.
Thank you, Ben. Maria Elena, I know you had your hand up and then you lowered it. Did you still have a comment?
Yeah, I just
We'll hear from the advisory committee members first.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties with my camera and everything, but I guess I just had to place a question or a comment. I understood the presentation, Ben, that you were responding to concerns about gentrification and you wanted to offer best practices, that was a concern that you heard either through the surveys or through community conversations or through this group, that we are concerned about displacement, period. This council, maybe not, or the community, there is a concern about displacement. In the understanding, right, in the perfect world of having mixed status, right, mixed housing and affordability and low income and market rate, et cetera, I guess my question is simple. If the comment of downtown is primarily low income housing, first I'd like that confirmation because I don't know if that's true or not. I'm curious about that comment. If that comment is true, then displacement is a huge priority, right, in whatever plan we move forward, because people are going to lose their housing. And as we learned in people, in some of the data at the beginning of the presentation, we know it, we see it at CAB, people are leaving this area. They cannot afford it, high density living because people cannot afford it. And so I'm curious as to one, what is the percentage of low income housing downtown? And number two, what does that mean in terms of displacement as we create the next steps in our plan? And I like the best practices that you showed. There's some balance there. And I agree with some of the comments. I'm curious about Gilroy, I'm curious about Hollister, and I'm curious about Salinas. And specifically about that displacement, because that's a lot of families.
Thank you, Maria Elena. Judy, I think you've had your hand up for a bit.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. I have somebody here, so I had to let him out. I will turn my camera on. I just had a clarification question about, you showed that you had 87 units in the Sunshine Garden. And I see that the Sunshine Garden is for sale, and it also had some problems with building. And I was just wondering, is there any way that the city could kind of get that property and develop it and repurpose it for high density? That's basically the short question. So the summary is it for sale? And is the city in a position to do anything with it? Thank you.
Thanks for that question, and I can answer it. My understanding is that, yes, we have seen it on the market. However, it is under active construction right now, so they are still moving forward with it. And the city, we don't actually build housing. We provide funding for others to do it, and we review applications for new housing, but we aren't the ones that actually build it. So unfortunately, can't buy it.
Thank you, Susie. Sibley.
Yeah, hey. So just a few comments. One thing from Salinas is they worked hard on their adaptive reuse ordinance, which I think is really important for downtown. And I'm sure Watsonville has some of that, but it's one of the best places to get more mixed income housing and more affordability when you can adapt to existing building. And there's always more you can do to look at the codes and rules that inadvertently make it really hard, to adapt buildings. But the other thing is, this is what I've spent a few years on in different jurisdictions, trying to figure out how do we get more affordable housing in mixed income housing. And in these kind of discussions, I make a couple points that I hope can be used going forward. And one is, I think what's coming up a lot in this discussion right now is that the affordability level matters as much as the percentage. And it's very easy for us to get fixated on the goal of 20% of the units or 25% of the units. But it could be, I'm just saying this, it could be that 15% of the units being very low income affordable is more important than 20% at low income, because of this point that the affordable housing has to be affordable for the people struggling a lot in Watsonville, employed in Watsonville, et cetera. So I just think those have to never be decoupled, and the state's RHNA goals coming to all the jurisdictions are showing that very low income housing is the huge gap. There's been some low income housing created, but very low income. So that's one thing. And then the last thing is, we set these inclusionary ordinances kind of out of context of the other rules. And I am convinced that even with the nexus study and state laws, you could have a higher percentage in your inclusionary ordinance, but you got to look at things like all the impact fees. And, I'd love working on housing projects to do more affordable housing and not have the fees be how we're paying for parks or, a zillion other things. And, there's other examples I can give where it's like, well, if we could change some of these other rules, and I know we need that funding for parks, but are we really saying that it's more important to fund parks in that way than have more affordable housing in the downtown projects, right? So I think there's plenty of other levers to pull where if you could make the housing projects somewhat less expensive to build, and to your term earlier, Ben, capture that value, and the height limits are, another one. And if we really wanted to say, oh, if we want to get 25% inclusionary ordinance, I've never seen a jurisdiction really sat down and say, look at all the levers that we could move that are important things, but not as important as affordable housing, and say, what does it take to get to 25% or whatever percentage? That's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Sibley. Bill?
Thanks, Simran.
Ooh.
I just wanted to comment really quickly about, hang on one second. Sorry about that, couple people watching. One thing that we have to understand, and I put it, Jane, your comments about we need all type of housing, and we do, and any net new gain is taking the demand and softening it. So we need to increase supply, which will, I would say, won't satisfy, but it'll address the demand. And one thing, when we look at the dollars and cents, if you have a private developer coming in to build a project and 20% of the units have to be affordable, and whatever number you want to use, 10 units, 20, 30, 40, 50 units, that 20%, let's just use 50 units, that's 10 units. And the absolute subsidy from the developer is about $1,500 a unit, or $15,000 per month, or $180,000 per year. And when you look at the cap rate and the opportunity cost of capital, it's about a $4.5 million investment. So we need to make sure that when we're looking at things, and Ben, I know you brought in, other areas like Oakland, and they're talking about 25% or 50% or mandated, a whole different demographic, number one. Number two, much more urban than Watsonville will ever be. And so we need to be careful that we embrace development of all kinds, and we need to provide housing for human beings, whether they're barely making it or they're doing okay or they're getting by. But I put up the city's rates, and a 2-bedroom very low is $866. So a person that would qualify for a low income or affordable unit would be paying $866 per month for a 2-bedroom unit. Their neighbor in the same building may be paying $2,800. So when we go ahead and have a mix of tenants inside of the building, there's no stigmatism, oh, I live across the tracks or this, that, and everything. It's a blending, and it's a diverse community, and we need to make sure that we support that, don't lose sight of it. So my only comments about it is, as we're doing multiple projects and we've done it for the last 20, 30 years, what's most important to understand is the cost of development is completely out of control, and we can't lose sight that, oh, we need more affordable housing. Let's just shove it on the shoulders of somebody who's going to come up, because then what's going to happen? Nobody's going to come and step up to the table. So that's it. But I think, by the way, great turnout for everybody. I think it's fantastic, and the dialogue's been great. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Now, I think we're hearing this theme across the comments, that there is the need and the desire to see all kinds of housing, more kinds of housing at all income levels. And I think that's something the specific plan will continue to emphasize. I wanted to give an opportunity to some of the other members on the advisory committee who haven't had a chance to share their thoughts yet. And I can call on you specifically, or if you have any thoughts you'd like to share, please raise your hand and share. I want to make sure we hear from all of you on this very important topic. Aurelia, how about you?
Thank you, Sam. I think I smiled too big. Anyways, good to see everybody. I think what we needed to stay focused on is on our downtown specific plan, that it is a given area that we're working with. And there is housing already that exists there. We're not talking about raising any housing down. we're talking about improving housing for our community. And we're talking about changing the face of our downtown Main Street, right? And making it, I think our downtown specific plan really is designed to help developers in a whole to be able to create the housing that we need, the projects. And that's from affordable to market rate to low income. And I think what we need to really stay focused on is that, there is properties that are underutilized that can be really utilized. And those are the ones that we're really looking at to make sure that we ensure that the housing is going to be distributed equally within the zone. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Aurelio. Thank you. And just as a reminder, at the last advisory committee meeting, we looked at what the downtown development code would contain in terms of the development standards, which will actually play a huge role in what type of housing gets built, not at income levels, but the kind which is actually either affordable by design. The streamlining that the city is undertaking right now to its approval processes is also something that will save developers market rate and affordable time and money, because that is indeed one of the major reasons for one of the reasons among many others for the cost of housing in our city and indeed our state. Let's see, Ben, I see you are on here. Ben Al, did you have any thoughts you'd like to share? Maybe not. Gina? All good. All right. We have, I'll give a last call for others who might have any comments, and then we can go to officially to public comment. I know there are several folks in the audience who would like to speak. Jenny.
Yeah. Hi, thank you. Thanks for this presentation this evening and a really rich discussion. And one of the things, so a couple comments. One, I really appreciate the discussion around ways to mitigate displacement. And I echo Mary Elena's comment that this was something that we heard collectively from the community and throughout the community meetings that was important to us. And so I appreciate that it came up kind of as its own topic for a specific meeting that was added to our downtown advisory project and work. And the other thing that struck me throughout our conversation is, yes, we're specifically talking about the downtown plan tonight. However, I think a lot of the ideas that were presented could potentially be applicable to other parts of our city and other areas. And so I think we're not like, I think there's opportunity. Well, we're specifically talking about the downtown plan tonight. There are definitely opportunities to explore some of these, new and different ideas in other areas. And so I appreciate that we were able to be given hear ideas from other cities, hear potential things that we could explore. And then, maybe we should start thinking about them in terms of what could we do with like the Kmart area, for example. So thank you. Thank you, city staff. Thank you all for the presentation this evening.
Thank you, Jenny. And certainly, as I mentioned earlier, the city will be looking at updating their housing element in the coming months, and there will be the additional opportunity to discuss some of these ideas, especially those that apply citywide at that time. Let's see. Don't see any other advisory committee members hands up. So maybe we switch to public comment. 2 minutes each. Let's start with Sean. Sean, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Two things. May and Mac announced extra loan fees for loans on second homes. So for $1 million, that's going to be just under another $38,000. So I think someone is, if that's their second home, it's likely to be a vacation home that they would, Airbnb 6 months out of the year, or that's an extra $38,000 that a renter is going to have to, make up. And if they're Airbnb it, that's just one more empty house. So the empty house tax is important. The other thing is our local firefighters have been in danger of losing some key tools. So if folks would take a look at the San Lorenzo Valley Post, this way we can take care of ourselves, support our first responders, for the health of everyone in Watsonville. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Yessie.
Hi. Thanks for hosting this. And I wanted to just back up what other people were saying about the fact that displacement's already happening. For like 30 years, my mom lived on the same street in Watsonville. And then our landlord died, the new landlord let us stay, but the rent just keeps increasing a lot. And me and my mom had to move in with my sister. So now we're living, luckily my sister has a bigger house, but it's still kind of crazy to me that if I wasn't lucky enough to have a sister who had already bought a house, like where would I be? And I was just wondering if we could just, I think that we should increase it to 25% for affordable housing. And I know that you guys said, well, okay, well, that might discourage developers, but like, can't we then just like, why are we so heavily reliant on those types of developers? And can't we start to work more with the nonprofits that we're trying to like incentivize other developers to build affordable housing units? And I do support like mixed incomes. I do think it's important for people of all different income levels to mix so that we do get like more community instead of individualism, which is what our society is kind of built around. So I don't think that 25% is like an extra 5% is too big of an increase. And yeah, people are getting displaced right now. And I like increasing the height limit because then even if you did increase the affordable units to 25%, if there's more units, then the developers would be like, okay, but we can still make more money because the building is higher. So then technically more units would squeeze. And yeah, I like what someone else said about pulling different levers, sorry, to see what we could do to like prioritize affordable housing more. And I know that there is like some other people are like, well, there's so much already downtown, but I mean, like we said earlier, so much of our community is low income, and just because you're privileged enough to not know what it's like to like suffer, to like not know what it's going to be like to pay rent, like that's not okay for you to just be like, okay, well, what about like our income and developers? Like, why are we always thinking, like, I know money's important, but I'm just saying, like, can't we just be more creative and explore some other options? And I do support mixed income. I do like the idea of that. And that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Yessie. Ellie.
Hi, yeah, I agree with everything that Yessie just said, and I would like to see more work being done in the way that she described it. Everything that she said was on point. I'd like to thank y'all for the format of tonight's meeting. I know that you had that public comment would be just at the end and it would just be 2 minutes, but you guys always do a really good job at being inclusive and answering our questions in real time as opposed to having to hold them until the end. and having to rush through our 2 minutes to ask those questions. So I just really wanted to take the time to once again thank y'all for the way that y'all conduct this meeting and answer our questions, even though we're not part of the committee itself. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. I think that's really important for all of us. Rocky, did I?
Yes, can you hear me?
Would you like to speak? Yes,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay, well, I know a few of the people on the call here. I'm a 75-year or lifelong resident of Watsonville, and I think this is a great program. I think it's very comprehensive, but I also can't help but think that you're focusing on maybe the tip of an iceberg. I think as you look at the whole housing situation of the Watsonville downtown, you also have to look at the businesses and the economic opportunity. As I drive around surrounding areas, Morgan Hill, Salinas, I see restaurants, I see dress shops. When I drive through Watsonville, I see a theater that's been empty for 15 or 20 years. I see empty shops in Bill Hansen's modern, nice new building. I see very little reason for people to want to go downtown. I'm looking at the title of your program this evening, and I kind of got intrigued by that. It's the Downtown Specific Plan. What I think you should be doing is talking about a downtown comprehensive plan that not only talks about housing, but talks about opportunity, talks about safety, talks about the whole thing, and get the business community involved. You've got some investors on this call. I'm always looking at opportunity. My family owned property for many years on Main Street, but I don't see it happening. The downtown people of Watsonville leave the area to do a lot of their shopping. So I just don't think it's a good idea to make Watsonville a complete housing situation downtown. It should be somewhat an economic hub. And so I would suggest that the downtown specific plan may evolve a little bit to a parallel plan that would be the downtown comprehensive plan, or maybe there is such a thing and I'm not aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. I will respond a little bit to that, even though it is the public comment piece, which is that the specific plan is intended to do what you just suggested. Today's topic was just focused on this narrow topic of affordable housing and housing in general. But the plan will address economic development, the needs of the businesses, and how to make it a real economic hub that all residents of downtown, all residents of Watsonville want to visit and be in. Ben.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much for putting on this meeting. I'm sorry I've been kind of in and out. I just had to put my kids to bed. I have young ones, so my apologies, but thank you for all your efforts towards this specific plan. I just wanted to chime in as a family who owns properties throughout Watsonville and downtown on Main Street. We're heavily invested in the area and very committed to continue doing business in the downtown of Watsonville. And we see this as a great step forward for the future and for downtown. I just wanted to comment specific to housing. My family and I think it's a great thing to have the ability to do more housing, to develop more housing downtown. Of course, like the speaker just said, we think it's important to have a variety of uses. Yes, there needs to be retail and restaurants and boutiques and services. That's important, as are the ability to have offices. You know, we're talking to a number of large companies in the area who have expressed the possibility of wanting to move their headquarters downtown, and that would be tremendous if we could make that happen. But you know, of all the different product types right now for what would go in downtown, residential is the highest and best use in terms of what developers can actually afford to build. If you're in the industry, you know that building new construction is incredibly expensive right now. the labor, the materials, just getting the supply. It's super challenging. What Bill Hansen has done and continues to do is amazing, and he should be applauded. But to circle back to some of the comments I heard earlier, if you understand the economics of developing from the ground up, the difference of 5% of affordable versus not is huge. I can't express how important the difference can be. It absolutely can be the difference between a project getting built and a project not getting built. It often is. So from my personal perspective, I feel that we should be encouraging new housing because the need for housing is so dire. Any type of new housing that gets built, I'm an econ major by background, and any housing that gets built is a good thing. It's going to increase supply. It's going to help fulfill that demand. So, would an extra 5% affordable be great? Absolutely. But an extra 5% of nothing is not as good as 5% less of something that actually gets built. So my comment is to try and make it as encouraging for new development as possible, and to not to overly restrict things and make it overly complicated to develop. If we really want to see the downtown transformed, like I believe we all do. So thank you very much for your time and for putting on this meeting. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben. Any other hands up? Oh, I see. Crystal, go ahead.
I really appreciate your presentation tonight. I learned a lot. I really learned a lot in the discussion. Thank you all. You worked really, really hard on this. I would love to hear a little bit more about our neighboring communities. What did Salinas do specifically? I've seen their downtown area thrive in the last 5 years, or at least 10 years. And I think they are a similar population. Same thing with Hollister and Gilroy. So I would just add those similarly situated communities, and what did they specifically do to create the opportunities in their downtown area for revitalization. I'd like to thank you all again. This is really, really helpful. And I just wanted to add, I would love to learn more about the cities that are a little bit closer to us in size, population, and location. Thanks.
Thank you, Crystal. Let's see, I think Bob had his hand up. Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you. I'd just like to say, in terms of displacement over 50 years ago, the city wanted to change some of the downtown housing down over by the Pajaro River and Main Street, and local churches got together with federal money and funded what was later called Sunny Meadows, 200 housing units. It's over near Home Depot now. So in the past, when we displaced some people, we were able to come together and find housing to build those houses. I would like to, I've enjoyed this conversation, and the idea of mixed use is important. That is lots of different levels of housing. I would like to emphasize that right now, the downtown, as I heard the original introduction, is primarily commercial, which is reasonable, commercial and public service. The thing that the Hansen development did was take advantage of a mixed use possibility to continue to have commercial. We need to have commercial downtown, but it also opened up the residential possibility. And I think the more mixed zoning we have, where more commercial is allowed to or encouraged to, through policy, add residential to the development of the commercial lots, then that just opens up a whole new possibility of a lot more housing units downtown. And we can argue about which level they're going to be at and make sure they're affordable for developers to build. But that whole corridor, bringing people downtown, having people live downtown, is good for downtown. And I think we need to all go away with that message that we want mixed commercial and residential. We want to expand the number of residential opportunities for the downtown area. So that's the main points I wanted to make. Thank you. And I can't figure out how to do my little raise hand other than raising my hand. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you for your comments, Bob. Let's see, I think one more comment and Lupe has her hand up. So why don't you go and then we'll close the meeting. We are coming up on our 8 o'clock time frame.
Yeah, good evening. And I heard the whole presentation and all the pages that you showed. My concern is, what about the residents in the Resitar and the other low-income housing places that we have currently? And that's for low-income people with limited physical abilities, as well as age differences and income differences. How is the new development of affordable housing going to impact on their lives as these changes of living wages go on? That's all, but thank you for all that. And what are you going to do with the Kmart area? And I also agree with the young man earlier and the older man earlier than him, that there is a need for retail and living structures like what we have in the terrace. But the terrace is pretty expensive for me, and I'm a limited aging disabled person, and I'm in a low income house. I get assistance, but I can't afford anything like the terrace if I move out, or if I need to move out. I can't afford the terrace at $500 a month. That would take half of my income monthly. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lupe. I know we don't have that much time left, but Susie and Justin, maybe you could respond to Lupe's questions about the Kmart site and others offline. You want to connect with her through the chat. And then wanted to thank you all for all the very thoughtful comments that you provided us. I know the members of the advisory committee and the other attendees are all coming from a good place in the end, and the desire for all of us is to see downtown Watsonville thrive and grow and to become a place where we continue to be proud of and as I said, see it thrive. So I wanted to just give you a quick update on what's coming next. As we are writing the specific plan, we expect to see you more frequently than we have been and to share some of the other aspects of the specific plan. As Susie noted earlier, we'll be bringing back some of the parking and mobility related recommendations that'll be in the plan, as well as other ideas about economic development. We expect to have a draft specific plan document for your review by June. So look for public release of that in that time frame. And with that, I believe Susie would like to say a few closing remarks as well. So I'll turn it back over her to end our meeting today.
Wow. I just want to thank everyone for your participation. This was a huge, long meeting. There was a lot of information. I just really want to thank everyone for the absolute civil discourse and, everyone just sharing their ideas, thoughts, experience. It makes this whole process so much better and gives us so much to come away with and think about. So I am not going to keep you any longer because we all got to go, get to bed do all, live our lives. But I just want to say thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're going to take all your words and continue to move forward, and stay tuned as we'll be holding our next advisory committee meeting very soon. And thank you, everybody.
Great job, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care.
Thanks all.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Good night.
Take care.
Good job.